Welcome, Dallas, to the World XP podcast. So before we get started, I have to shout out Coach KZ Fit Coach. The apparel, super comfy, great stuff to record podcasts in. Never have to think about it. It's just super comfortable. Put it on, and we go. Dallas, it's been you're fresh off a complete and utter domination of nationals for the
Yes,
NCAA D1 swimming and diving.
Yeah, swimming and diving. Yeah.
Swimming and diving, complete and utter domination. Apparently, is the adjective that we're using. Go through. So, for those that don't know anything about swimming and how it works as far as scoring and whatever, can you take us through sort of your team won. Obviously, people would know, like, who have watched the Olympics. Oh, he was faster than the other person. But what does it mean to sort of have a team win in swimming?
Yeah, the team win is, at UVA, it is really about the team, and to have a team win means that you have 16 to 18 women. We're talking women's NCAAs here, or men. We had our men also. They placed 9th at nationals, which is also fantastic for them. A team win means you just have across that depth. You just have you have all these women from, winning events. Paige Madden won 3 individual events, all the way down to, if you just have someone score in the B final, which could be, 5 or 6 points, but you have across the board, you have point scoring throughout the whole team. It's hard. It's hard to win an NCAA event, I'd say. If you win one, that's an impressive feat. And every now and then you're going to get colleges that have, one swimmer who's just so great at what he does or she does, and they go in and win an event or two. A good example of that is Minnesota's. I'm blanking on his name right now because I'm thinking women. But anyway, for a team to win, you gotta have the whole team on board and scoring and swimming at their absolute potential. Kate Douglas was swimming at her potential. Ella Nelson swimming at her potential. Paige, again, like I said, swimming at her potential. But you have to have, those scores are always going to be up there at the top, scoring 20 points. You get 20 if you win an event, and it goes 17, 16, all the way down through 1 point. So, having, you have one swimmer who's there for one event and she scores 9th or 10th, and that's, you get those few points, but it's like, across the board, your team is scoring points, and that's a hard feat to do. It's hard to assemble a team for the NCAA championships and not only take the team there, but also score at, the high enough level to score points. After 16th place, it's a goose egg. You get 0 points. So it's hard to have that depth and be successful at it.
So how many events are across a meet like that? How many events, and then about how many points on average per event would you need to kind of run away with a win or a championship?
Yeah, I mean, there's 21 events total, and that's including diving. To run away with a meet, there's always the old adage where it's like, if you win the relays, you win the meet. And because, relays are double individual points. So if you win a relay, it's 40 points. If you win an individual event, it's 20 points. And all the points are doubled from there. So, if your relays, our relays were top 3 for the women's meet. And if you're top 3, those are, 38 or 37, 36, all the way to 40 points. And you can, that's, you do some damage with it. I wouldn't say there's, a specific point total that makes you like, oh, this is the points you need to win, because theoretically you could have just because there's so many different teams. It's not like a soccer situation where you have Manchester United versus Arsenal and they score points individually against each other. Now in a dual meet format, that works, but for a championship style meet, there's 25 different teams here at this meet, and you could have someone from the very bottom score, 20 points, and that throws off the whole mess. if you get a run, we were 100 plus over NC State. So, if you're over 100, 150 around that mark, I'd say you're pretty set on winning. I think it was 491 was our total points to 354. NC State was second with 354, if I'm remembering correctly. Don't hold me to that. But yeah, no, I mean, there's no exact number to hit, I'd say.
Yeah, I would say though, even if you cross into like the 350, high 300s, low 400s, you're looking pretty good at that point,
Yeah.
regardless
Yeah.
of kind of what everybody else is doing.
Right.
So to qualify for that, is that just based on times or team times? Because you said there's 25 schools at the event. There's 21 or 25 schools at the meet, 21 events, but that doesn't leave like some schools wouldn't have people in every event.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
how does the qualification for that work?
the best way to describe it is, so there's a time standard that everyone needs to hit, and there's technically two time standards. There's a B cut, so NCAA B cut, and that gets you a qualifying time. Now, if you get a qualifying time, you need to be top 21. Sometimes it's the NCAA, depending on how many swimmers they want to take in an event. Like when I swam D3, I remember the men's 100 fly, when I swam, they only took like 17 that year or something like that. And I was fourth. So it's like, well, I'm safe, but you could have been 18th and been like, what the heck? And then in a different event, they're taking 20 and you could have made it in that event if that was it. So there's a time standard. There's like a bottom time standard, which is called an NCAA B cut. And then there's an A cut right above it, which is, if you get an A cut, it's an automatic qualifying cut, and they're, relatively faster, I'd say. So if you get an A cut, you're definitely deserving of it because you're going to be in the running for top 5, top 6, depending on the event sometimes. And so that's for individual basis. So like, if last year's NCAAs had William and Mary, small, mid-major Division I school, they had a guy who was second or third in the 50 freestyle, and he would have made the event. But William and Mary doesn't have a relay that would have gone to the event. So that's where you look at relays also. In all relays, there's a B cut, and they just take the top 18 to 25, just depending on the division or depending on the event. They'll take X amount of relays, and that's what they'll take. And it changes on the years sometimes, just depending on times or money or something. It's really up to the NCAA for picking who makes it.
Mm.
Yeah,
So
it's a little weird.
when you're talking times, and this has always been something that's like I've wondered about, when how much improvement is there based on, like, assuming that like the the work ethics of two swimmers are about the same, how much of that is like, is it down to height and just like physical like gifts, I guess, versus like in other sports it's you can be smarter than another player, or you can like have a better 3-point shot if you're shorter, and you can like make a place for yourself in a sport, in other sports. But for swimming, is it just kind of based on like there's not really a way, at least that I could think of, that there is to do that? Can you kind of like elaborate on how swimmers improve, and then like the ability of someone that you would say maybe like isn't so good? Like, all right, have you seen somebody who you'd say like before, like, oh, they probably don't have the physical gifts or whatever, but like work really hard and like jump up like more to where you thought they would be? Or is it mostly just down to genetics and luck at that point, or luck of genetics, I guess?
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff that I'm going to try to compile into like one little like easy answer is, I mean, personally, like if we're just talking personally, I think if you spend enough time with someone, anyone can improve drastically. Now, if you're talking like two people like battling out, they have the same training schedule, et cetera, size, height, feet size, flexibility, all those things, all those factors are going to come into play. It's the nature of all athletics, I think. If you're bigger, stronger, faster, and smarter. I mean, you mentioned smarter. That's one thing. It's like, the longer the race goes, the smarter you need to be, I think. Just because, you got to know, you got to control, like, how's my pacing? If I'm swimming the 4 IM, like, am I pacing right? Am I doing my turns right? Is my stroke count right going into a wall? You gotta have some intelligence to it. So, I have seen many times, someone might be, average in the swim world, you could say, for a man, it's, 6 foot, and for a woman, it's 5'7", 5'8", or something. I'm just throwing stuff out that I think would be average, height wise. And, it's, I mean, you can have average people come in, train them properly, teach them how to do it. And, personally, I've seen some really great examples, actually one at UVA. So we have a guy named August Lamb, and he's a goofy kid. I hope he's watching this and laughing. But he's really, I mean, he's a good guy, and he worked his butt off. He came in as a walk-on at UVA, and he had swam club. He had a background, I will say, which is helpful. But he just worked his butt off. I mean, my God, he just, he took the extra time. He, did what he needed to do, and then some. And then he became our fastest 50 freestyler 2 years ago, I guess now. And then this past year, I mean, he crushed it again. I definitely think that he's going to continue improving. And, I will say, in the sport of swimming, a lot of people are just like, oh, like, the crazy, they're crazy. Why do they train so much? And, they're up at 5 a.m. swimming. And the reason for that is, you get up to train in something that you're not used to a lot. So when we're playing soccer, I'm going to keep using soccer because you're Mr. Soccer. Sorry. Soccer and running and walking and jumping, those are things that come natural to people because that's what we do every day. You walk to work, you walk to class, for example. Those are motions that are normal. Swimming is complete. I mean, you're going from this to, I'm sorry for people who are listening, you're going from like vertical to horizontal, and you're doing movements that are very unnatural. I mean, when was the last time you saw somebody walking around swimming breaststroke in the air to walk? Never. So, if you put someone in the water for 4 hours a day, plus weightlifting an hour, plus dryland an hour, you do that 6 days a week, give or take, with hours and whatnot, you're going to see a lot of improvement. And I think that, biologically, yes, you want to get the kid who's, 6'6", 250, or a woman who's 6 foot and, 165, and they're all pure muscle, and they've been swimming since they, were 3 years old, and have like a million, age group records. And you want that, but it's like, I think it's kind of a little personal. Yeah, well, I wasn't the shortest guy either. Swimming wise, there's a great picture my dad has of me in the blocks at NCAAs, and it's like I'm 5'8", and then like the next guy's 6 foot, and then 6'2", and it goes up from there. And it's you're gonna have every now and then you're gonna have stories like that, and I think they're great. And I think that I never would put because they're X height, they're not going to be good. Because I think if you spend enough time with someone, you can make them good. You're going to have to work at it different ways and train them probably a little bit harder, and they're going to have a higher ceiling. But, I think like, and I love our sport because swimming is it shows true athleticism. Like, you just got to be so good at being uncomfortable, and not even just like, physically uncomfortable, because I don't know how often you swim, but putting your head down in water and not breathing is not comfortable. But also it's just like you're horizontal doing weird motions. And so I think anybody can be trained. I've worked with Division III swimmers, and now I've worked with Olympian hopefuls and Olympians, and it's just like, I've seen the differences. And if you asked me 2 years ago that question, I would have been like, oh yeah, like you got to be 6'6" and be gifted by God Almighty. And it's just like, that's not I wouldn't totally agree with that now.
The reason I ask is because especially in soccer, you've got guys who are like super tiny. Messi is like 5'6", and then
Yeah.
Ronaldo's 6'2", or like even like Zlatan is like 6'4", and you can find spots for all of them, and they can all get to the same sort of like world class level. Where I feel like, I guess my question to you is like in swimming, to get to like, if you're like under the 6 foot mark, it's like, is there a cap to like, yeah, you're probably not going to be an Olympian, or like, I guess that's kind of what I was getting at. I feel like there's kind of a barrier, but again, like obviously I'm not a swimmer, so I don't know, but
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a
like
barrier per
like a
se.
cap
I
to
think
like a cap to like the highest level.
I'd say the factor that caps you from the highest level is feel of the water. And I know that's a weird terminology. It's just, when you're swimming, you know, some people have a more natural feel for the water and they can mold it, shape it, move it better than most people. And I think those people develop faster and therefore perform better and will continue, especially at like the highest level. Um, I think, I've seen, I can't remember his name exactly, but I remember a long time ago, University of Georgia had a swimmer who was like 5'8" or something like that, and it was like third at Olympic trials. I was there for a swim camp, and I remember the head coach Jack Bowerly brought him, and he talked to the group, and he was very short, but he was built. I mean, he was definitely built, but he just like he could move.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the feel. So the feel of the water is just like how well you can move and shape and work the water for you. So I'd say I'd say height is always going to be, if you're below 6 foot, it's going to be a heck of a lot harder, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot harder. Um, or if you're below like 5'4" for a woman, like it's going to be a lot harder. But there are definitely examples of people who have done it. But I would
Yeah,
say, generally speaking, most people are taller. It's like, in any sport, like in basketball, you're going to have
sure.
like, you'll have every now and then you'll have one guy who comes down and is like blowing up the field. And, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. Mugsley Bogues, I think, was pretty short. I think he was like
Yeah,
5'9" or something. Yeah. So it's
yeah.
like you every now and then you'll have that. But, being above 6 feet is
Mm-hmm. I
that's
just
that's
asked
the
because when you like watch a swim meet, it's like they have like, if you have the extra like 3 4 inches, like you don't have to do that extra stroke, or like that reach will
yeah.
get you the touch that you need to like to win that extra like
Yep.
millisecond or whatever.
Yeah.
um because especially once you get up to those margin, like those levels, those margins are so fine.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like one like little things um
One
could
one
be the
hundredth can
difference.
separate
Yeah,
you. Yeah, seriously.
exactly.
And yeah, and I mean, that's always going to help you. Um, everybody knows the Phelps race in '08 and the 100 fly where he
Hmm.
just barely out touched by .01, and it's just like I don't know their heights, but I'd be curious to see if Phelps was like an inch taller or something like that. But I mean, he has a huge wingspan too. I mean, you
Yeah.
can look at wingspan. Heck, I mean, you could be like, oh, what's their wingspan? Um, if you want a good example of that right now, like currently in the NCAA for women's sports, we have, at UVA, Lex Wenger is, our best breaststroker, and I mean, she's not super tall. If I had to guess, I don't know her height off the top of my head. Also, shout out to Lex. She's the best. Lex is maybe 5'6", 5'7". But I remember watching the 100 breaststroke with her, and then NC State has a girl, Sophia Hansen, and she's 6'1", six. She's tall. I don't know what her bio says, but it's not. Her bio is incorrect. She's like 2 inches taller. She's very tall and she's very talented. And it's Lex would always pull up to her. They'd hit the wall and turn, and Sophie would always be in front of her because she was taller. Like she'd
Hmm.
always hit the turn because she always had an extra inch. So yeah, I mean, having that extra inch is going to help you, but I would never discourage someone who wasn't at that height threshold.
Yeah,
Cause
yeah,
there
of
are different
course not.
ways to have speed. Yeah.
Yeah, of course not. It was more just a curiosity thing about once you like jump up to that like Olympian hopeful level, like
Hmm.
is that something that you've noticed?
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of Olympians and Olympian hopefuls, I know you've been coaching a few at UVA.
Yeah.
Um, and so what is their sort of, because obviously they're still students,
Hmm.
but what is their sort of mindset as far as they balancing school and swimming, and then obviously training for the Olympics is no joke. So how do they balance that, and like how do they lean on their sort of support systems to kind of make sure that they stay on track for both of those sort of entities, I guess?
Yeah. Um, you know, the balance between school and, I mean, honestly, being especially a Division I athlete, it's work. It's
Hmm.
school and work. And balancing that, I think for any student athlete, whether it's football to squash, um, it's tough. It's really, really hard because if you're performing at that level, you need to have discipline and dedication to what you do. You can't say, oh, like I got practice at 3:30, and then I was supposed to meet with a group at 6 o'clock or something like that. But I'm gonna blow that off because I'm tired. Like I got stuff to do. I gotta go eat, and I'm gonna take a nap, maybe play some game. Like you can't do that. Especially, I've name dropped a couple people on our team already. They're Olympic hopefuls: Kate Douglas, Paige Madden, Alex Walsh is another one. Um, the those women, if we're just talking Olympic hopefuls, but I will say the whole UVA program just, you know, truly dedicated and truly, determined to be excellent in both, areas of life. Balancing that is, you know, it's hard mentally. I will say I give a lot of credit to all of our athletes. I'll also say again, shout out to Paige Madden. She is probably the most mentally tough athlete I've ever seen slash worked with. And, she excels in the classroom, and she's just an absolute just workaholic in the pool. And she's so good at what she does. And you know, she's honestly kind of a joy to work with because it's really nice to just, here's your practice and you can watch and she'll do it. Um, but I think she would tell you too, she needs her support system. And you mentioned that word, and I think that's a great word. And that, I'd say, the support system in swimming comes from three areas. It's your staff, like your coaches, obviously. And at UVA, she has a primary coach, obviously, and that's Blair Bachman. And I'd say Blair is super supportive and understanding for all her athletes. And I think to be a truly successful collegiate coach, you got to have the stuff. And the stuff is, understanding and empathizing with your athletes in order to help them excel. And so Blair does a great job of that. Obviously, Todd DeSorbo, the head coach at UVA, he is masterclass his job, and now people are staring at him just like, what's he going to do next? Um,
Probably
but
why he wins national championships.
yeah, I wonder why. Yeah, huh? And we can get into that later because that's, he's done an amazing job. But your support staff is, your coaches, your family. Obviously, I think that, I think a lot of collegiate athletes will tell you that they talk to their parents a lot more probably than the average college student, just because it's so, all these kids are coming from all over the country and sometimes the world. We had two kids, one from, uh, Great Britain, and another one from Poland. So it's like, you have these people coming in from all over the world, really, to do this, get an education, and to swim. And so your family is really important. And the last thing I'd say is your friends or your teammates, or, whoever that includes. Um, I'd say also another reason why we were just so successful at nationals and ACCs and just year round was because the team bought in and they love each other. Now, when I say like love each other, like obviously like swimmer A and swimmer B are not going to be like best friends. They don't have to be, but you're going to have a support system there. Like you're in it together. You're all going through that grind together. And I think that makes a unique college experience too. I think that makes you a better student. I know that our swim program has always been exceptionally good in the classroom. And I think most swim programs would say that also. I think they're pretty good in the classroom. But then also just, they work out together, they eat together. Most of the time they live together. So, they're to be a world-class athlete. And I know, like, Kate, Alex, and Paige, as they prep for the Olympics, especially because a lot of the swimmers, they finished a couple weeks ago and they got that national title trophy, and they finally had that, like, big sigh of relief, and
Hmm.
it's well warranted. They should sigh. I know everybody probably took, like, 3-4 days off because, like, you need some time to rest and recuperate. Um, but man, now most of them are training for the trials meet. Olympic trials is coming up in June. Um, but when you're preparing for that, you kind of have to you always have to have that mindset flip. It's just like, take it one step at a time, but, like, you got to be ready for the next thing. And that's why, like I say, like, Paige is so tough, because last year, or, like, actually I could say any of the girls, Kate, I could say Julia Mankhouse, I could say Jess Nava, I could say any of them who are returners. They're coming back after a year where we're seeded to win, and they're just like, oh my God, COVID. And then, go through a couple of months over the summer trying to
Hmm.
find places to swim. You have to build back. And so it's hard for a swimmer's life. It's always like, what's the next thing, until literally your last swim ever, when then you stand on the side of the pool and you go, now what? And I'm totally not saying that out of experience or anything, but
No,
um,
you just went straight to coaching and standing right next to the pool again. You
that's
never left.
exactly right, Eric. That's exactly what I did. Um, but you gotta have that support system, and to do that, to prep for trials now. I mean, it's a game changer. You gotta switch courses, short course yards to long course meters. You gotta change your mindset from tapering, resting your body and prep for the meet, like NCAAs, and then back into, all right, we're hitting the water hard and we're going all out again.
Hmm.
It's meant, this sport is, a lot of people say gymnastics is the hardest sport, and I'll always be like, swimming. But, like, I'd say swimming is one of, if not the hardest sport out there, because of the mental factor. Because a lot of people have off seasons. There really isn't an off season for swim. There really isn't. You get a couple weeks here and there, but it's
You
mostly
talking
off
about
season.
college for off season?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and even high school. I mean,
Hmm.
you'd think high school season, they have their big meets in March, take a couple weeks in April, back at it, go long course season all through the
Hmm.
summer, 2 weeks in August, back at it again for short course again. And it's just like over and over again. Um, and
So
that's
you
just,
mentioned a couple things that I want to touch on. First, for those
yeah.
listening that don't know what long course and short course is, can you kind of describe that?
Yeah, yeah. So there are different courses in swimming. There's no, I mean, us Americans love our yards. So we're, the United States swims short course yards. That's 25 yards down, 25 yards back. You can figure out the rest, just by adding. Um, Worldwide, FINA and USA Swimming normally swim short course meter and long course meter. So there's 3 different courses to swim. The Olympics are swim long course meter, so that's 50 meters long, and 50 plus 50, 100. You can figure out the math from there. So 3 different courses in swimming.
Do you need, so obviously for like like I've seen pools where it's like 25 meters like wide and then 50 long, and so you just
Mm-hmm.
switch which way you go. But for the yards one, do you need a different pool for that, or do you just kind of put a barrier that like cuts off the last, like, I don't know, 6 feet or whatever it would be,
Yeah, yeah. What is it? 6 feet? I
or
think it
so,
would be.
I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
something like that. Yeah, I don't know, math. Yeah, no. So normally, like, those big, everybody thinks about those huge pools, the big, rectangle. Those are the 50-meter ones, obviously, and then you can divide it. Most of the time it'll be 25 meters across. There's something called a bulkhead, which is like a movable piece of land, quote unquote, that you can move throughout the pool, and you can make yards pools, and some pools are built yards. But most of the time, I will say, like, for collegiate pools, it's, you have a 50-meter long course pool, and that way you can swim long course meter events, which obviously for Olympic trials and long course meter meets, you can swim those meets there or practice there. And then if you need to move it for short course meter, short course yards, you can move that little. It's pretty cool. As a volunteer, I had to push it a lot. It's not like, it's not like on its own, you have to push it like physically.
Mhm.
Great workout, by the way. If you need a good workout, push a bulkhead.
Yeah, just
And you
find
just,
a random pool with a bulkhead.
yeah,
I'll just do that.
yeah, show up after, a 6 to 8 practice. They'll be moving around 8 o'clock. You just show up and just start pushing that thing. Uh, and yeah, you can flip the pool any way you want it.
Gotcha. The other thing I wanted to touch on was the Olympic trial training. So I know,
Mhm.
like for soccer, if you have a player that, like, if you're a college coach and you have a player that's training to go pro, and they're a winger normally, but you want to play them in center mid because that would be the best thing for your team, but you play them on the wing for their own like development, and so they train as a winger. Do you have swimmers that, like, for the team, they would get more points if they did XYZ event, but for the Olympics they'll probably do this other event? And so, like, how does that happen in swimming? And then if so, how do you kind of balance that out with their training? And, like, during the season, are they training like with the Olympics in mind, or is it just like season and then, like, okay, now Olympics?
Yeah, I'll answer that last one first because that'll kind of set up into the rest of it. I think everybody has like their long-term goals, and they're just like, I want to make I want to go to Olympic trials. Let's just say that's the goal. I want to go to the trials meet, because going to the meet itself it's pretty tough. Um, so you want to go to trials. Okay, great. What's the first stop in that journey? And that's our mid-season meet. That's in November. Okay, what's the next one after that? Okay, we have conference meet. Okay, after that, nationals. And it's a progression almost. So you can't, I would say, you can't get the gold medal until you take the steps up into it. So I think as they train towards that, everybody has their specific stroke or strokes quote that they're predominantly better at. And I think people will automatically try to do those most of the time, especially in their training. If you're organizing a training, um, for one swimmer, you have 3 events in the NCAA, and then you can swim as many as you want for Olympic trials. And then if you go to the Olympics, it's however many events you qualify in. So obviously, like most people are going to know Phelps. Phelps swam his best individual 4, and then he was on 4 relays. So he got 4 events there, and he trained probably for other events too, just because you never know what you're going to qualify for. But if you're planning someone's training, if they, for NCAA season, let's say, for example, um, I'll use myself as an example. Why not? I swam the 100 butterfly, the 200 butterfly, and the 200 IM. And that third event is kind of tricky sometimes, because I probably could have swam other things instead, but I scored the best in that third event in the 200 IM. So for me, I was like, okay, like, for my team, what event should I swim? And as a coach, if somebody has 3 events that they're just great at and they fit well together training wise, like the 50 free, 100 free, 200 free, that's great. Put them in it, let's go. Or 50 free, 100 free, 100 fly. That's an even better example because it's short. um, that's helpful. But I'll use August Lamb as an example again, because I love him so much. I'll pick on him. August, doesn't necessarily have an amazing third event. He's got the 50 free, which he's amazing at, the 100 free, which he's pretty dang good at. And then he's kind of got this third event where he can play around. He's gotten a lot better at his third event now. He's swimming the 100 breaststroke. And figuring out where he needed to be for that kind of was a balance between what can he swim and what is he best at for the team, point wise. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're putting together a team, you want to have everybody scoring in their 3 events, because if you miss a score in an event, that's points you're missing. Now, if you're, let's talk long term again. Let's think Olympic trials. Most people who are, very gifted and very talented in the water will swim 6, 7 events. Alex Walsh, I mean, I'm not obviously not her primary coach. That's Todd and Blair, actually. And they'll probably be like, all right, 200 free, 200 back, 200 breast, 400 IM, 200 IM, and I don't know what else they'd put her in, but let's say there's 5. So she got 5 events now. So she's going to, especially switching now into this long course meter training for Olympic trials, she's going to be training more towards that stuff. In season, when we're, swimming for 3 events where she has the 200 back, or 200 breast, honestly, she could swim anything, but 200 IM and the 200 free. Let's just go with that. She's going to have a different, different focus, I'd say. When we do pacing days, she's going to pick one of those events rather than the 400 IM, because Alex will tell you she hates the 400 IM. She could be very good, but she doesn't like it. So it's prepping and scheduling and training for that. It looks different as the year progresses. I'd say, generally speaking, you have sprinters, mid-distance swimmers, and distance people, obviously. And then you have everything in between, which, I think placing people in the right training groups, UVA does a great job with this. We have 4 groups there. Todd has a group. Wes Foltz has another group. Tyler Fenwick coaches our men's distance group, and then Blair Bachman coaches our female distance group. And the structure around that, they pick and choose very meticulously where people should go, and they change it up all the time too. You can be in one group one year, flip it to another group another year, just based on, there's different styles of training going on in those groups, and they're doing different focuses on events. A good example is Todd's group. 50, 100 freestylers and some sprinty people. And, every now and then they'll be swimming a 200 of something. But then Wes Foltz also has sprinters, quote unquote, but they're doing hundreds and 200s, maybe every now and then a 500 swimmer. So, you have all these places to train, and I'm trying to, show that you can put people places, like in certain places, but it really, it just depends on like what they're focusing on at that moment for the team, or long term, just depending on, what they're training for and how effective they're going to be in those places.
I guess let me give some more context, and maybe this will help in terms of like reps. So like, for example, I've had teammates where probably their best position would be a fullback or a wingback, but the coach is like, they're good enough to play center mid for the team at our level, but for like to jump up a level, they're not good enough to be a center mid. But the coach will play them at center mid because he wants to win at this level. So player will then get upset that, oh, I'm not getting the reps I need to like develop in the position where I can like jump to the next level.
Gotcha.
Is like, in that sort of context, is there enough time to where like they can adjust from one event that's slightly different to another, or is it kind of, it's all, or is, at the end of the day, is it all like, if it's the same stroke and is it kind of just, not to say is it just swimming, but like if they're doing that same stroke and just changing the distance, is that a big adjustment for a training regimen, or like kind of, you know where I'm going with that kind of?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it's different stroke to stroke. I'd say someone who, let me give you a good example. Caroline Gamelik, she's a 4th year at UVA. She's graduating. Amazing 50 backstroker. She was our 50 backstroker on the 200 medley relay that broke the American record, and she could fly. Her 100 back was also very, very, very good. Her 200 back was not, I mean, it's still very good. Like, don't get me wrong, but she would tell you herself she'd rather swim anything else. Like, but I know that, for the past 3 years before this year, she was in the 200 backstroke because that's where they needed her. And I'd say, when that jump from 100 to 200 is probably the hardest jump for a stroke. So butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, or freestyle, that jump is probably the hardest, because it's quite a big double. I'd say, you're doubling the amount of turns you do, you're doubling the amount of distance you're doing, obviously, but it's, that puts a lot more strain on the body. You can't throw, you just can't put your head down and spin, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's like it's not really still a sprint, but it's like becoming not a sprint anymore.
Exactly, right. And so, I'd say, yeah, I mean, we definitely, put people in events like that. I'd say a more common thing that happens is, you have somebody who's really good at backstroke, for example, but they're also pretty good at freestyle. So
Hmm.
you put them in a freestyle event also, as their
Hmm.
third event, and you cross strokes. I'd say, the ability to cross strokes is really important. Like, you should be a well-rounded athlete in swimming because it helps all of your swimming. But yeah, I mean, if you want to win, and you have someone who you think could, transition, like, hey, you know what? We're putting you in the 200 fly. Like, I mean, I personally, when I swam, I remember my coach, Abby Breathauer, shout out to Abby. I swam the 100 free my freshman year of college, and I'm 5'8", and I was like 130 pounds, and I was like this
Hmm.
skinny. And I was so adamant that I needed to swim the 100. And Abby was like, "Be better swimming the 200. Like, you think you'd do better." And I probably should have listened to her, because then the next year I qualified for NCAAs with it.
Hmm.
So I mean, you gotta, when you're crafting a team, if you're talking about, like crafting a team, and putting people in the best position for the team, yeah, you're gonna have plenty of that. I
Yeah,
wouldn't say as common as you'd think. And then, training wise, they're probably gonna be, like, why am I in a 500 freestyle practice when I don't do this, or I don't like
sure.
doing this.
But they understand though that like, or like they have enough leeway training time between like nationals and Olympic trials that they
Oh yeah,
can. Yeah, that's more of what I was getting at.
yeah,
It's,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
they do, yeah.
it's like they understand that like they might not want to do it. It's like, but they'll have enough time to get the reps in that they need
Yeah. Hmm.
afterwards. Like from an individual perspective, obviously from the
Yeah.
team perspective, you'd want to do what makes the team best. But from the individual swimmer perspectives, like they have more
Mhm.
than enough time to get in the reps that they need before their own like individual stuff in the summer or whatever.
Yeah, and also keep in mind, like, you have 3 to however many events, especially for like the summer for, Olympic trials. They're gonna they're gonna prioritize those better events anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, if the best event for someone is the 200 freestyle, they're gonna be doing more 200 freestyle stuff than 100 freestyle stuff if that's their second thing, and then 200 backstroke if that's their third thing. Like, the 200
Yeah.
back is just like extra stuff. Now, like, does it annoy them? Probably. Like, they're probably, muttering under their breath, like, I hate this. Why am I here? But I think, they know, like, it's just, you know, like, I hate this, but at least I can score points, or,
Yeah.
I can make a cut.
100%.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier when we were talking about balance between school and swimming, you mentioned it was like work. Most people get paid for work.
Yeah. You're right.
NCAA athletes do not, and I know this has been a big issue. I think with the NCAA football video game that came out, I think like they re-released it or started making it again this past year,
Mm.
or maybe the year before. Um, and obviously with March Madness and all the ad revenue that comes in for that the schools get. What are your as a right? So like not to diss UMW or D3 schools, but as a D1 coach that like from a school that brings in lots of revenue, what are your thoughts on that?
I think, you can look on Twitter, and there's probably like lots of memes about it and everything, about how athletes are basically just like unpaid workers, or like interns, or whatever else Twitter will
Mm-hmm.
throw out there, or Reddit. um I'm in the camp that, I don't see why they can't or shouldn't be paid. And I think it stems from the fact that it's just like, you see all these schools bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue sometimes. I mean, I don't have any specific numbers for any, like a Clemson or Alabama for football, or you look at, like a basketball powerhouse school like Kentucky or Duke, or they bring in so much money from these revenue sports. And especially as a non-revenue sport coach, it's hard to see all the, this massive amount of money flowing through. And some of these athletes, it's definitely not not as big of a problem in the sport of swimming, I'd say. I think that's, a conversation for another time, but it's like, some of these athletes in football and basketball, like they're coming from really low income houses, and, they kind of struggled, and they're using athletics to get a good education and hopefully play professionally, because that's a way to earn money. And, I don't understand why. I recently watched this great documentary on it, and there's an example of a high school prospect student who was getting, you know, I think he had like 50 shoes that were given to him by X, Y, and Z company. And he had all these shoes, but he couldn't sell the shoes that he didn't like, because that would go against NCAA bylaws. And then he would get fined, and he wouldn't be able to play in the NCAA. And he could have used that money to help his family, or he could have, donated them to his school or something, but he couldn't do any of that. It's definitely, I'd say from a non-revenue sport perspective, people who make the Olympic team do go on to earn money at the Olympics. I've got, 4 examples right here. Katie Ledecky, when she swam at Stanford, $355,000 for winning all her gold medals. Ryan Murphy from Cal Berkeley, $234,375. Simone Manuel, about 200,000. Lily King, 135,000. It's just like they're earning this money competing for the United States. And, Operation Gold was, the U.S. Olympic Committee trying to, say, hey, like you can earn money for winning medals and competing for the United States. But it's like, isn't that against the NCAA? Like, it's in that, that's kind of hypocritical, because, if you look at the NCAA's policy as to what varies between an amateur and a pro, if you're paid in any form or accept any promise of pay for playing an athletic contest, that considers you a pro in the NCAA's eyes. But it's, it's clearly just, it's a hypocrisy for one thing, but two, it's just like, these people are doing it, and they're like the 0.04% of athletes that get to go to the Olympics and get money, possibly. So it can work. I mean, obviously it's being done. And, you look at the marketing revenue and the, just ad sales, anything, anything that comes from March Madness or, CFB, and you can just see that there's plenty of money coming in. I don't think that's a knack on the NCAA. I just think the NCAA just needs to change with the times, because marketing in the past 30 years has exploded. I think as soon as Nike and Under Armour and Adidas started slapping shoes and gear on teams in the 70s, I think it was, or the 80s, that was meant for the players to have and to use, like, at their own discretion. Like, it was used for marketing, obviously, but it wasn't used as a means to say, oh, well, let's not, let's let these people just basically play for free. Like, and I don't think that, they're going to get a good education, sure, but there's no guarantee they're going to graduate. There's no guarantee that they're actually going to get a good education. That's just the promise the NCAA makes. And, with all that said, it's just like, is it really going to hurt EA Sports to put the name of someone, the name, image, and likeness in their game, and pay them, I don't know how much they pay them. Let's say $5,000. Let's just say they pay $5,000 per player. And it's just like, it's $5,000 times, however many athletes there are, but is that really going to hurt them in the long run? Like, every year. I mean,
No, they bring that in from FIFA Ultimate Team in like 1 week.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, yeah, like how much, I remember my brother used to play FIFA, and he spent like $500 on those packs, like the car, like to get the gold card.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. And it's just like that's insane. Like it's so, I mean, I think the times are changing, and I think that, it could also be a reflection on athletic departments spending ridiculous amounts of money on, venues and centers and everything. And I don't necessarily think those things are bad things, but I think that because they're bringing in this stuff, they've gotten a little excessive with it. And then it also could come from, price of tuition also. I mean, if it costs $70,000 to go to a school, And, they're trying to justify, hey, you're getting a $70,000 scholarship, so you're getting paid 70,000 with room and board and everything. I just, I think they've gotten a little too complicit, yeah, with their money. I'd say I think
Yeah.
they're bringing in so much, like so much. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. And I think if they really truly care about their players' health and safety and their experience and their ability to be like really, they really are employees. They're the ones playing the sport. Um, I think yeah, they should be paid. It's not like they're gonna be paid like billions of dollars. Um, especially like you might have one or two every now and then. Like I imagine if let me think of a good player. Like if Tom Brady wasn't really all that amazing in college. Let's see, like I'm thinking Herschel Walker. That's the first name that came to mind. Herschel Walker was like the dominant Georgia running back in the 80s. Imagine if he got money. Yeah, he'd probably make like, maybe 90,000, 100,000. I mean, he probably would make over 100,000, but it's like that's one player compared to a lineman who's going to make 10,
Would you worry about programs or schools that bring in more money, for example, a Duke or a Kentucky basketball, being able to pay more, and then like how would you decide who got paid what? And that's kind of the things that I'm in the camp that I think they should get paid as well. But I think there's a lot of that opens up the door for a lot of potential like, well, that's not fair. And now since Duke has more money, they'll definitely get all the best prospects, and then no one else will ever win because they just bring in more money. And I don't think that anyone wants that, right? You want
yeah.
competitive
Oh, yeah.
Environment.
Yeah, I'd say, and that's definitely where people go, well, wait a minute, this. And I mean, just justifiably too, because I mean, it is quite a concern. And that's where, like I said, like a big time athlete, like if they're the Michael Jordan in college and they're just crushing it, they're going to get most of their revenue from, if they're allowed to use their name, image, and likeness, then Nike could sponsor MJ in college. I think it'll keep people in college longer too, because they can make money in college.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that all institutions, and this is where, like, if you want a fair competitive environment, like I think whether it's the school or the nation or the NCAA, really, if they they bring in all this money, so they should also set the boundaries of like, hey, all your salary as a NCAA athlete is X. Like that's your salary, and that's a flat. Like nobody can be paid more from the NCAA across the nation. Like I think
That's what I
that's
would
like,
think.
yeah, it's just like you got to have a salary, because like whatever else comes after that, like you can't control, and you can't be like, oh wait a minute, you can't go that far, you can't get sponsorships, because then it's just the same thing all over again. Paying someone is one thing, but it's like, in the true spirit of capitalism, I guess, like if someone is better, then they have more opportunities and more ability to go and get stuff, and they're gonna want it too, and other people are gonna want it also. Like, you know, I mean, LeBron. Like, imagine if LeBron played college, and it's just like, he's in college, he gets his flat rate of whatever X is, like, this is what you earn for playing for the university. You get 20K. I don't know, I'm just making up a number, but 20K. He can use that 20K to go help his mom back home. He can use it to I don't know what else he'd do with it. Go buy more shoes. I don't know why he would, but he could buy different shoes. But LeBron is going to get every company in the world trying to get him a sponsor and do commercials. And so, that's other revenue for him, and he deserves it if he's the best player. Like, my God, like, of course he does. But, if I'm thinking about non-revenue athletes, I mean, there are definitely sponsorships out there like Speedo, Arena, TYR. Those are, companies that would sponsor probably the better swimmers, obviously the ones who are going to the Olympics or who
I've even heard of two of those companies.
look at that. There you go. But, it's, one of the swimmers, if they had the right connections or fell into it, they could be a spokesperson for like obscure, like the Naked Smoothie company. Like maybe they wanted a sponsor, and it's just like they could get, a great sponsor, promoter out of one of our swimmers, and maybe they make 5K and they get a case of Naked Smoothies. Congrats. But it's like, that's still something, and some people might want that and need that, and I think that that's fair. I mean, I think that's they're already getting their salary, quote unquote, and I don't think like for those who are arguing like, oh, like the scholarship's the salary, and it's just like, no, the scholarship is the cost of attendance to go there, and whether or not they spend the full time there and get a good degree, and you can also argue, is it really worth 70,000 or however much student loan debts are? And then you can get into the whole
different
thing.
discussion.
It's a whole different ball game, and then you get into like, I mean, the other thing I'd say is most people aren't getting full rides, half scholarship, quarter scholarship, 6 scholarships. I'll pay for your books. I don't know. I mean, some coaches, they get really specific, and it's just like you can't give out a full ride to every player, unfortunately. So it's I don't know, institutions need to make money, but at the same time, they make plenty. You can go on to any state university and you can look up how much they're bringing in each year. They'll have the revenue report. I think all public universities are required to put that out. So
should go look that up in my free time.
Yeah, and your free time.
Yeah. I also wanted, yeah, it's a difficult dilemma, I think. Do you know the original intention behind the no sponsorship or like no not getting paid? Does that have to do with the keeping it like an amateur thing?
Yeah, I think the original intention, and you can go all the way back, like back in the day, it wasn't a business. People went to college to play sports as a part of the education, not a means to education. I think that's become the difference, is like if you're going to play football at Tennessee, you're going to football, or you're going to Tennessee to play football. Like you're getting an education too as a part of it, but you're spending 8 hours a day working on your craft of being an athlete. And that's where I think it changed, because my great uncle played football for the University of Georgia and went on to play pros. And his salary was like something super cheap when he got to the pros. It was only like 20,000 or something ridiculous like that. But Fran went to just play football at the University of Georgia. Like he was just going to have fun and play it and get a good education. There was no incentive. I'm sure they might have had scholarship, but there wasn't the blown up, business that has become college sports. And if the NCAA wanted it to stay as an amateur area, where only amateurs can play, they should have kept marketing and ad revenue out of it. They should have, taken all the, they shouldn't charge. I don't know how much it is to see a football game now, but.
Well, no, why would they do that when they don't have to pay the athletes anything and they can just take all the money?
Yeah. And, that's the unfortunate thing. Yeah. So, and I mean, there's also probably a lot of other little things. I'd say like something to overlook totally is like, you talk about support staff, athletic trainers, they get paid like nothing. And they're like the medical providers. But I know part of the argument for, keeping amateurism in it is like, oh, they get healthcare and they get this. And it's just like, right. But athletic trainers are only paid like this tiny sliver of amount of money because they don't prioritize the athlete's health or, happiness, really. I mean, it's hard. Like if I'm an injured athlete, I have to go get training, and it's, if they're not funding athletic training to its full extent, then the athlete is not going to get, they're not going to get as better as quickly as they could or be as happy as they could. And that trainer's also probably like, wow, I probably should have gone to med school.
What? So they can go in more debt?
Yeah. Well, there you go. Back to the debt thing.
I should stop making debt jokes.
But I mean,
Um,
it's definitely a double-edged sword, but like the flat answer is the times are changing. Athletes need to be compensated for all the work they do.
100%. Want to get your thoughts a little bit. We don't have to go in too deep to this before either of us say something stupid. Um, but the sort of gender pay gap in professional sports. What are your thoughts on that? I can give mine kind of summarize, but for me, I think it depends on the sport. Like basketball is different than soccer. Like the women's soccer team, for the national teams anyways, like they have a more than good enough argument because they win, and the men didn't even qualify for the World Cup. But
Yeah.
from basketball, it's like kind of when you talk about like the free market or whatever you were talking about, like capitalism earlier, you get paid more if you're the best in the world at something, and by that standard, it's almost it almost doesn't take gender into account because none of the women in the WNBA would get into the NBA. So the NBA are the best players in the world, regardless of gender. Now, it so happens to be that way because of the gender difference, obviously, the height, strength, like the physical differences and stuff. But I don't know. For me, I think it depends. I saw like a post going around Instagram that was like Sue Bird has the same number of seasons as LeBron and the same number of championships and the same number of something else. And I was like, yeah, but that's not the same. And then like when you slid it over, it was like Megan Rapinoe saying that the women's soccer team should get paid more. And there was like the same argument. And I was like, yeah, but that's totally different. So like for me, it depends on the sport almost and like the situation. Like they all have to be on a case by case basis. I don't know. That's just my like, and I haven't really thought it out that much. So if anyone feels the need to comment and be mean to me, don't. I'm not advocating for discrimination, obviously, but
Obviously. I mean, it's a very tough subject right now. I think that a lot of things came to light when the women's national soccer team brought that up because I'll be really honest, like I can't remember the last time I watched the men's national team soccer game, and maybe that's because they don't win or they're not on air ever because they don't go into anything. But I've watched the women more than the men, and I have a blast watching the women because I think they're just absolutely incredible. Um, as somebody who coaches both men and women, I can tell you that, and especially in a sport that, it's not known for like these, incredibly high salaries or, I mean,
mm-hmm.
unless you're like literally the saying is like, unless you're Phelps or Ledecky, like it's hard to make a living off swimming. Um, and, I think that, I, like I said, I coach men and women, and I think they both are incredible, and they both have they're both a blast to watch, and maybe that's just because I'm a swim nerd. But I've also loved watching like women's volleyball. Like I remember watching Jenna play. Like, oh my god, like it was so much fun.
They're almost
But
different sports. Like
yeah,
they're
I'd
almost
agree
different
with that.
sports because like when you watch basketball, like the women's basketball is so much more fundamental because they can't just like take one dribble and then jump from the free throw line and dunk. So
Yeah,
it's a lot more fundamental. Soccer is kind of the same way. It's a lot simple is not the right word. It's a lot more like pass and move, like take a touch, pass. Like they keep the game simple. And whereas the men's don't do that as often. And so they're almost like, and then volleyball, women's volleyball versus men's having, so one of my best friends growing up played volleyball at Penn State. He's like 6'10", can jump through the roof. It's a different sport almost entirely. Just like
yeah.
I didn't mean to
I
cut
wish I
you
was
off.
6'10". That'd be cool. No, yeah. I mean, I definitely think that the way the games are played are different. I'd say swimming is it's pretty equal, I'd say.
Mhm.
Like we train together and everything, so I'd say it's pretty the same. But you know, when it comes to like payment, I've always been in the camp where it's like I think all professional athletes, you know, as time goes on, you know, they need to be paid. They need to be paid according to survivability. It's just like, you know, I would hate to be a woman, you know, and I obviously am not a woman, but I would hate to be a woman in the WNBA. And I don't know salary wise, but I would, you know, it would be very hard to, you know, play with like a $30,000 salary. I doubt
Mhm.
it's that low, but like that would be incredibly discouraging. And then I look at these absolutely insane contracts that some players in football and basketball and soccer get put into, and they're just like, ah, yes, $399 billion for 5 years. And it's just like, do they really need that
Yeah.
much? Like, my God. And like you know, I think it's a balancing thing, because I think in order I want women to be paid what they like. I want women to be paid equals the wrong word. I think women need to be paid a good amount that's survivable and makes them happy. Like I don't think, you know, I mean, call me not a capitalist, but I don't think anybody needs, you know, $500,000 a year to, you know, just, you know, do whatever. You know, they're working, they're training, and you know, obviously they should be paid a lot. But I don't think, you know, if the wage gap is way too large, and I think it also that just turns into the whole like just the real world is just like a pay gap. But if it's too big, then people are going to take note of it, and they're going to want equality. But I think with sports it's very difficult to make that happen quickly. And so I think the best way to go about it is that, like, you know, I mean, call me crazy, but I don't think LeBron needs to be paid like 50, you know, million a year or whatever. Like I don't
Sure,
know what
but
it is, but you know.
who is he to turn that down? Somebody
Right,
offers it to him.
exactly. Yeah. And so like, you know, that's the problem, is that like, you know, maybe it's the employers, maybe, you know, maybe it's the, you know, governing bodies, the NBA or the WNBA or whoever, but it's like, you know, I think, you know, people need to be paid according to what their profession is. And I think, you know, like I'm a swim coach. Like I'm not going to make a lot of money ever in my life, but you know, I'd like to make a living wage. My God.
No, for
And
sure.
yeah, so it's, you
Like,
know, you have women that, you know, these are their careers, and sometimes they're, you know, the sole provider of a family. So, you know, I don't see how it's not impossible to pay 100 grand for every, you know, WNBA player, when NBA players are getting, you know, I don't know what the minimum or average salary is for an NBA player. See, I don't have the
yeah.
research behind it, but
This disclaimer: the numbers that we're saying are not accurate. We're just
no, not
throwing
at
out
all.
numbers.
I literally make up all numbers unless it's
Yeah.
on my note sheet in front of me.
No, definitely. Like the livable thing is like that should be the bare minimum for sure,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
my
and
opinion. But also,
yeah,
it's hard because the organization has to stay afloat. Like the team has to stay afloat. So
right,
if they don't have the like the margin, the profit margin to
yeah,
pay, then it's like
mhm,
then it's a different issue, and it's kind of
mhm.
like, what do you do? I think basically like it's a very complicated problem, and no one knows the answer.
No one knows the answer, but I will say
Yeah.
I'll throw this out at you. So if it's the organization's goal, like they have to obviously stay afloat. So then it's like, you know, this is where I think it falls on people, and you know, just supporting and enjoying. Because I mean, you know, we both have agreed that, you know, some women's sports that are arguably not, you know, quote unquote fun sports to watch, or are not as popular, quote unquote, women's volleyball,
No,
etc.
it's not that they're not as fun. They're just different.
Correct. So I think it comes down to people to be like, hey, like if there's a WNBA game, you like go. Like I think if more people got on board with like supporting
Hmm.
and, you know, getting, and this also fall, I guess, on marketing too. It's just like market them better. My God, like make them, you know, blow
Yeah.
them up to superstardom. But it's like, you know, support. I mean, it's just like I always feel like I had this problem as a swimmer, and as a coach. It's just like, getting people out there. I mean, I will say sitting in a swim meet for like 3 hours is tough, and maybe that's another conversation. Is how do swim meets need to change? Because my God, like no one's gonna want to do that unless you're a swim fanatic. But it's like, how do you get people to support something that needs the money in order to make something happen? And it's just like, I wish I lived in a town. I'm in Richmond right now, or I was in Charlottesville. I wish I lived somewhere where I could go to, like if I lived in Charlotte, I could go see it's the Hornets, right? Or the Charlotte Hornets. Yeah. So it's like, I wish I could go see the women's team in Charlotte, or the DC's women's team. I don't know the name of them, but it's just like
Mystics. Come on, man. You don't even know.
Dude, I don't know. Anyway, so
watch
it's
it,
like,
watch it not be the Mystics, and I just look like an idiot.
That's not. I mean, the Wizards Mystics sounds about right. But it's like, it's maybe as a society we just need to start supporting women more in their own sports outright. It's a different fun game. So it's getting people out there. Take your family out. Go on a date there. Who knows?
Well, it's tough because even like the minor league baseball for men's, or like USL for soccer, it's like the second division. It's like nobody goes to those games either, really. No. So it's like, it's actually hard. People don't have a lot of time, True. Like they're always running around doing different things. It's like they're gonna see what's blasted in their face, and what's blasted in their face is like NFL, NBA.
Yeah. So again, maybe it's marketing, but I will say, Richmond Flying Squirrels, minor league team, man. I've been to a couple of their games. They're pretty fun, and they've got a dope mascot.
I'm sure they do. Like, it's a different atmosphere. It's a lot more intimate because the stadiums are smaller, and
right.
It's just different. But
yeah,
I think we've gone down the rabbit hole slightly.
Yeah, a little bit. That's okay.
We've both, I don't know. We both probably said some dumb things. That's fine.
Well, I mean, I will say it's like, I think, women in athletics, it's rising a lot more and a lot faster from what I've seen. It
should be.
And I mean, it's like, I'm glad, because I think it makes everything so much better. Like if I was just coaching men, I'd go crazy, because guys are so stupid. Like, my God. And it's just like,
That's for sure.
For sure. And it's just like, getting to coach women and being a part of a women's sport it's fantastic. I don't know any other adjectives. It's just fantastic. So it's, I think we're both in agreement where it's just like, something's got to change in terms of for women, and you can call it equality. You can call it fixing capitalism. You can call it whatever you want, but it's like, there's a lot of issues with athletics right now. And that goes all the way down from NCAA all the way to the pros. And it's just like, the problems are
even past that. I have my bone to pick with youth soccer, but we won't go there right now.
But yeah, it's just like, there's a lot of problems, and tossing ideas out how to fix them is never a bad thing. It's just we just gotta be there to support it and make it fun for everybody. I mean, sports are fun.
Yeah, bringing it up and having the conversation and bringing light to a situation is never a bad thing, unless you do something really stupid. But but what's the future look like for you? So I know that your time at UVA has come to an end. Obviously you went out in a winning way, so that's always good.
It was a really cool way. I wish I had the other ring, like the rings we'll get, but here's the ring from last year in case people want to see it. It's pretty cool. We'll get a bigger one, but yeah, I definitely went out in big fashion.
All the bling bling.
All the bling bling. What's up next for me, man? It's I was a volunteer at UVA, so I wasn't paid. Funny. But it's the job market. Applying to different jobs right now, seeing what comes up, and I'm just kind of just waiting around, writing a lot of stuff right now personally, just trying to collect my thoughts after 2 years at the best women's team in the nation. So it's been a really great 2 years, and thanks to Todd, Blair, Wes, Andrew, Tyler, and my roommate Peter, who was the other volunteer, and Drew, the diving coach at UVA. They they were a great staff to work with. I learned a ton under them. So now it's just, where am I going next? And I have no idea. So maybe the next time we talk or have a podcast, we'll have an update on that.
Who knows? Probably, hopefully by the time this is uploaded, you'll have found something. Obviously, I've mentioned before, we've been stacking episodes, so I think this one will come out a little while after it's recorded, but it's never a bad thing. All right, Dallas, where can we find you on social media?
So you can find me on Instagram at coachdallastarkenton.com. And you can also follow UVA Swim and Dive while you're at it, because, just give them more love, man. They're awesome. I'm trying to think I've kind of flushed out social media, honestly. Like no more Facebook.
It's a good thing, probably.
Yeah. So just find me on Instagram, Coach Dallas Tarkenton, and I don't post a ton right now because I'm not coaching. So, but hopefully I'm somewhere I'll start posting again.
Sounds good. I appreciate your time. We've been on, I don't even know how long. Time's flown by.
Long enough, man.
But definitely, hopefully we'll have you on again soon. And with that, we will see everybody next time. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Eric.